Hello and welcome to the show. I am back today on BeamNG Drive at the Proving Ground circuit, going to be, well, driving some motorsport vehicles till destruction. You see, there are all sorts of, types of motorsport, all sorts of types of motorsport cars in Beam, and while a couple of sort of rally and Baja style vehicles have gone around this circuit, other motorsports haven't yet, but that is going to change. Today, we are going to start with a drift car. Now this is this 200BX, which does generally have some quite strong wheel axles, but of course these vehicles are seriously not designed for dealing with this kind of circuit. The suspension is not supposed to deal with bumps in this manner at all. So they're going to be well out of their comfort zone, of course. They are likely to have very low ride heights, and they often have very, very stiff suspension. This is all stuff that is bad in terms of survivability, really, around here. The only plus point, and it is something that we might see possibly, is that while, yes, the suspension on these cars is not designed for what it is being tasked to at all, it's the complete opposite, it is at least quite strong because it's, more heavy duty. It's designed for motorsport applications, shall we say. It's a slither of hope, really. And the cars themselves are quite powerful. They're all going to be relatively fast cars, so we shouldn't have problems with getting around the course and making the jumps comfortably, even with a little bit of damage. Now with the drift car, of course, we do have a lot of steering lock, a lot more steering lock than normal. That might come in handy if bits get broken, or it could play against the car if things get broken in a strange way. Maybe it'll have an effect, maybe have a worse effect on the steering. I don't really know. We'll have to wait and see on that one. I mean, things like drive shaft, of course, is always a concern with any of these rear-wheel drive vehicles, naturally, and snapping a front wheel off, especially with these wheels, of course, being able to have much more extreme angles. If I am caught with a wheel, if I'm caught steering when we land a jump, I guess the wheel might be at a really bad angle and just get torn off. This is stuff that we're going to have to wait and see on how it's going to affect the car. So far, it's actually not done too badly. All things considered, it is very quick. We're not going to be flat out the whole way down here. While the rule, that is the problem thing, of course, bear in mind, drift car does want to move around quite a lot. It does want to, funnily enough, drift. We got that one under control. Now the rules for this series, if you haven't seen this before, all the vehicles have got to be driven as fast as I can get them around the circuit, but that also doesn't mean I have to be flat out everywhere. That jump in these sort of speeds of cars, that jump, the shafted jump that we just went over, if I go flat out there, I will go straight into the Armco fence because the car is just very quick at that section. It's not really enjoying the dirt. That's unsurprising, really, for this sort of a car. It is actually, it's survived all of this so far quite well. There's nothing horrific in terms of the damage on this one. Oh god, it kind of gets away a little bit that I can't go as fast as with this car, perhaps as some, because I've constantly got to try and stop it from oversteering. It does really want to oversteer a lot, so I'm having to lift off the throttle, get on the brakes where perhaps I wouldn't with some other vehicles. Oh, that's a sickening crash on the floor. Yeah, it's these jumps here that I am worried about the car. Oh, taking more damage. The rear doesn't look happy. That rear suspension does not look in a happy way. It's not going to be in a happy way across that either, so I'll set the car up for these tabletops. It's fine. Okay, the exhaust has been damaged. It sounds... It's changed the sound, the volume is still the same, but it's quite a loud car to begin with. Oh, that section there is quite nasty. Front left wheel is a little bent. Nothing more... Oh, we just went straight in there. We were just going straight. I tried to steer, nothing happened. We went straight on. Across the checkerboard. The checkerboard is a real concern for these cars because, as I said, they're likely to be running very low to the ground. They've got very stiff suspension, and that checkerboard could seriously mess up the underside of the car. We're talking drive shafts is the main concern. We did not want to steer at all through there. I think it was partly on me, actually. I don't think I was using as much steering lock as I thought I was. I'm trying to not go crazy with the steering lock, of course, because the drift car has so much of it, we don't need it all the time, if that makes sense. Through the spin as we go, no problem at all for this machine. It's not perfect. It's not in perfect condition, and we do get bounced around the bottom. The car bottoms out quite a lot. The wheel axles are doing pretty good, though. Oh, this is where we've got to be careful, though. Yeah, he's not happy coming up this section. It doesn't really go to straight line properly, and on the dirt, that's concerning. Okay, we're good. Comes crashing back down. Yeah, it's weird on the steering front. It just doesn't really seem to be responding very well anymore to steering inputs. That's fine. Rear suspension does look like it's collapsed to a degree. I'm not sure quite how bad it was to start with. It's certainly not healthy, but it's also not dragging on the floor. This is an important thing. We'll see how it goes to the checkerboard. That's probably the bigger test than this section. The checkerboard and the speed bumps after the first corner, they're the real... I guess also Shallow Grave, the water splash section, that has caught drive shafts on cars. In fact, tore the whole front end off the Crash Hard Classic. Oh, that jump there is actually not as big a deal in this car because there's so little grip. I'm struggling to carry any speed over there, so it doesn't actually really become much of a jump. These do. That section there does crash about for the 200BX. This is an impressive showing, actually. I think this is going better than the normal one. I can't remember how far the original one got, but might not quite be, but it's going surprisingly well for a car that should be a million miles outside of its comfort zone. I mean, it is quite a long way outside of its comfort zone. We have started to get some steering issues now. That will not help matters. Are you going to roll over on your own? Am I going to have to get the node grabber? I am going to have to get the node grabber. Okay, that has caused problems for the car, as we can see. It's the front left is in a bad way at the moment. Okay, it's still drivable though. I didn't want to hit my own bumper. Okay, that has pinged free. We are going to lose that front left wheel, I should think. I would rather it fell off though, to be honest with you. The good news is because of the steering I get from the front right, we do still, I think, have the ability to carry on. It's just going to make it awkward at places, and I am worried about the spinners. If that wheel, for whatever reason, it catches or something. Okay, I simply can't. Oh, it lost the drive shaft anyway. I simply couldn't get it steered, but it doesn't matter. The drive shaft is gone on the way into the water. That's not how I expected the car to go, especially not with that level of steering damage. I really did expect that wheel to fall off, and that to give us grief. That was a very innocuous bang on the drive shaft, I must say. That really didn't... It didn't really do very much. It wasn't very quick into the water section. It was obviously just enough. It's difficult to tell how damaged the car is. It's not an easy place to actually look on the chassis. Actually doesn't look too bent. So it did well for a drift car. I've got to say that did do rather well indeed. Slightly anticlimactic death at the end of all of that. We move from a drift car onto something that's about, well, as far polar opposite as I can imagine. We have a full-on drag car. This is the Blue Buck, which, I mean, in standard guise was actually very, very successful around this course. I think it still sits in the top 4 around this track. It survived a hell of a battering. Theoretically, then, this version, or this car should do quite well. I mean, there are things to consider. First of all, well, let's leave it in drive. Yeah, so first of all, the car is monumentally fast, which means I can't... I'm going to have to be careful with the throttle. It'll be easy to go so fast somewhere to just launch the car clean out of the map. The suspension, of course, is not really designed for corners. It's designed for acceleration. The tyres are also a big thing here. They're designed for kind of launching and accelerating, and they can get sudden huge amounts of grip in inconvenient places. And, of course, the front tyres are tiny. They're little bicycle wheels. It does still have remarkably good steering, all things considered. They are perhaps not as strong as a normal steering setup. It's difficult to know on some of this stuff, but again, it's a vastly, vastly different machine. The basic vehicle, though, is pretty good. The Blue Buck is very, very strong around here. The drive shaft, again, it is always a concern with this kind of car. Front engine, rear-wheel drive, a very long vehicle. On a track that is a well-known chassis killer, bender and breaker. That is what I would be worried about normally. Oh, the other thing might be the steering. It is savagely quick, this car. It is absolutely monstrously fast. Come on, fly nicely through the air. Maybe not quite like that. Okay, it has crashed back down to earth. No, I would say no real harm done. The other thing we could see from a drag car overheating, these engines are unbelievably powerful. Now, we're not firing the NOS or anything like that with this vehicle. It wouldn't last long regardless, but there's so much power going on the engines. While yes, they do have very, very fancy high-end radiators, if that gets broken, this engine will overheat absurdly quick. Hell, which one is it? The Moonhawk? One of the other drag cars used to, I don't know whether it still does, but used to, if you just ran a full, I don't know, couple of mile drag race at full chat, it would just overheat the engine as it was, despite the best radiator you could get. So, yeah, well, we're not going to, of course, be running full speed in this car very often. It just can't use its power. If the radiator does go, I would not expect the engine to last long, and it might overheat without the radiator even going, depending on what we're having to ask the car to do. Oh, and it's just, as soon as it looks like you might be able to use a little bit of power from the car, jeez, you just have to immediately go on the brakes, because it's going to go so far across these jumps. Right, we're fine. Lap 1 actually went relatively smoothly. No major problems with the car. I'm trying to keep an eye on the sort of chassis, how the wheels are faring. We have seen with the classic cars, of course, the rear axle can sometimes essentially jump out of its housing. We've seen that with the Moonhawk-based cars, mostly. But yeah, if that happens, we are in a lot of trouble because there is so much power going on in this car. We need that to be properly managed, shall we say. Right. Oh, Toblerones we have hit quite hard, and we have gone for a roll and another one. Are we going to go back onto our wheels? We are not. That is a shame. Oh, okay, that car was easier to roll over than I was expecting. I thought we were going to have to go. I put up the node grabber strength a little bit, about 45%. I was expecting it to be a lot heavier. Okay, sure, it's a stripped out motorsport vehicle, but still. Oh, that's not fun. Something was not good at the front of the car. I wonder if it's bent something in the roll that might be leading to the car now catching on the floor. I'm not sure. Certainly something does not seem so good at the front. We'll have to wait and see on the next time around. It's going to be the checkerboard that might be this car's undoing. Now, we have seen this with the bigger vehicles before. If stuff starts getting bent, things start dragging on the ground, and you hit the checkerboard, you hit the speed bumps, whichever it might be. If it hits that and catches on whatever's hanging on the car, that can really tear your chassis apart. That can cause you huge issues, or just straight up rip the drive shaft out of the vehicle. So I'm a little wary, definitely a little nervous about what might be in store for this car. You see, visually it doesn't look like anything's wrong with it. It feels a bit funky to drive. The steering feels quite vague. It feels like kind of pulling. It's difficult to know when the car is wanting to wheel spin constantly. It's definitely pulling. Oh, that's nasty. It's definitely pulling to the right at the moment. Which wheel is it? Oh, do not want to be sliding across speed bumps. That is the way you do get your car into trouble. Okay, vehicle, what have you got? You're going to rock around from side to side. That's unhelpful, to say the least. Still, it's bouncing around something horrible. That's fine. Through the water splash we go. What about the checkerboard? Oh, that's... well, I would give it its finishing position as the furthest point it got to. I was worried about the checkerboard taking the drive shaft out because something was clearly buckled, something was clearly bent on the car. I don't quite know. I mean, how buckled what? It didn't really look like the actual chassis. It really doesn't look like it's that buckled, to be honest with you. Just hang the car. I'm hanging the car by the roof and the bonnet. It's probably not the best way to do this inspection. Don't put me in charge of a garage. And the underside doesn't really look buckled, but definitely it was catching. So a part was catching, and it was catching well enough to give the car grief. I mean, that's always the concern, really, at the end of the day. It's always going to be the concern that you would get caught on something like that. Again, it was going quite well, and it's just all of a sudden this sudden, huge, catastrophic death, and that is the end of the drag car. And for the final vehicle to run through the course today, we have got a hill climb car. This is the Sunburst. It is very low to the ground, has a crazy body kit, has an awful lot of power, has very stiff suspension, and has full-on slick tyres. It really is far away from what you want around this circuit as you can get. Even more so, the drag car had ground clearance. The drift car had at least slightly softer suspension than this. The only saving grace that may well play into the car's favour is at least it is all-wheel drive. That is the biggest, I guess, advantage with this one. It is all-wheel drive, so if we lose one drive shaft, the car will still keep going. That didn't sound healthy, but it's going to go through hell pretty much, so one slightly weird sound is the least of our concerns. Yeah, I am worried how the suspension is going to cope. I mean, it's really with the shallow grave in this section, the checkerboards, really not sure the car's going to do very well there. It's fine at this point in time when it's relatively new, suspension is still relatively working. It's lap 2 or lap 3, if it makes it that far, things are going to start being buckled and bent and probably just not a good time. The Toblerones was not a good time either, but no real harm done. Here we go to the spinners. Now we have acres of grip at the moment, so they are completed relatively problem-free. Gets chucked about by then. Now we definitely cannot be flat out towards the shafted jump. This car is way too fast. 60 or so miles an hour should work. Actually flies very nicely. Oh, it did fly very nicely. But we have now become front-wheel drive. Why? That's rather unhelpful. It is weird front-wheel drive, though, I will say. It's not really proper front-wheel. Well, I mean, it is. Its front wheel's the only one's being driven, but it doesn't seem to be able to really put its power down, which does concern me a smidge. It's still quick enough. You know, it's still able to clear. It's going to clear 30 miles an hour relative ease. I wonder why. I feel like the diff is just wasting all of the. I guess maybe it is. Maybe like it was quite heavy rear-wheel drive biased, and when it's gone, it still wants to send. The transfer box is still wanting to send power to the back, so it doesn't. Regardless, whatever might be the reason, it's not great for the sunburst. Radiator is gone as well. That's likewise pretty bad news, so I have to work the car very hard now to try and get it to do anything, and it's not fallen foul. Oh well, it doesn't really matter anyway. I don't think it's not fallen foul of the crawler rule in that it's still going quick enough to be allowed to continue, unless this is going to be allowed to drive as a one-wheel drive car. If anything might, I thought this could possibly be allowed to. Once it lost that once it lost the drive shaft, it was always going to be in trouble, and yeah, it was really struggling to use or put its power down in a meaningful way. Clipped the speed bumps, went for a roll, and that was the end of one of the front wheels as well. Funnily enough, as predicted, the hill climb car is not the best suited to the proving grounds. It did at least survive a lap, which is something. So, on to the leaderboard, and it's actually a pretty good showing from both the drag and the drift car. The Blue Buck would go slightly further, a weird occurrence with the drive shaft snapping on that, did ping it back slightly. Unfortunate, because it probably would have rolled at least to where the Kashira was, but that is how it goes sometimes. The 200BX drift car actually went a mile further than the standard 200BX, which is not the result I'd expected. I guess maybe the car's just tougher in general, kept that drive shaft alive for a little bit longer. It's a good showing, actually. That is a good showing from the drift car, from both of those vehicles, actually. Now, we do have to go back. It's a familiar section, really. It's that turn 1 at the start of the second lap that has claimed so many cars that would take the sunburst as well. This is a little bit more expected in terms of distance. The hill climb car is so low. The suspension on that car is so stiff that is unsurprising, really, that it would die in such a location. It was doing okay for a little bit. And the drive shaft went. Once the drive shaft to the back went, it was kind of all sorts of horrible, and that was really the end of the sunburst. The motorsport vehicles kind of interesting around here, but nothing crazy long-lived. That, though, is going to be it for this video. As ever, I shall link all the mods used in the description, so you can download them and have a go with them yourself. That, though, shall be it from me. Until next time, a goodbye.